Hello, hi. Hi, female section is ready. Whenever you are. No, I don't.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And good afternoon to all our guests. I'm Muhammad. I'm one of the English teachers at King Khalid University, along with a team of diverse English teachers from all over the world. Before I continue, I'd like to thank the Quality and Development Unit of King Khalid University under the leadership of Dr. Muwafiq Momani for organizing this event and for allowing me to address you. Can we please give a round of applause to Dr. Muwafiq and his team? Yeah. On behalf of the Quality and Development Unit of King Khalid University, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our special guests from the Oxford University Press. Thank you for joining us today, and also all of the attendees for braving this weather and being present here today. Our topic for this year's annual forum for English language is Teaching English in the 21st Century. Our program today is jam-packed. There will be 3 sessions. The first session will begin at 4 and ending at 5:30. There will be a coffee break from 5:30 to 6 o'clock. The second session will begin at 6 and end at 6:30. And the final session will begin at 6:30, concluding our evening at 8. Without boring you with any more details, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first session entitled Teaching, Writing and Assessment, presented by the Oxford University Press. Please put your hands together for Dr. Terry Craddock.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for that. Good afternoon. I want to say again a big thank you for braving it through the rain today. We were very lucky, my colleague Zaid and myself this morning, that Dr. Manami came to our hotel and he said, come out, we'll show you the city. And so he showed us lots of rain and fog, and that's what we've seen. So hopefully the weather will cheer up later, but thanks, as I say, for making it through. So most of you will remember me from the last time I was here, which was the end of November, and we did a session on ESP and reading, as I remember. As you know, I work for Oxford University Press, which is a publishing company that supplies English books around the kingdom. But it is my job to deliver teacher training. So basically, I travel around Saudi. I'm very lucky, although I live in Riyadh. I travel around Saudi visiting schools and universities and delivering training on our products, but also on various different pedagogical issues. So we're going to start this afternoon, it's usually morning. We're going to start this afternoon with writing. And before we look at any of the training that we go into today and tomorrow, I'd like to just discuss with you some expectations that I normally go through with teachers before I begin training. When we deliver training to such a diverse group, there are things that you need to bear in mind. That this is not, first of all, this is not a lecture. So myself and my colleague Zaid are not going to stand here and tell you how to teach writing. and Zaid isn't going to stand and tell you what to do. The idea is that as you're together, it's a really good opportunity for you to discuss teaching ideas. We're going to bring up issues and topics, but we really need you to be involved in discussing and giving us feedback. The idea isn't that we give you everything. I'm not going to ask you to stand up and run around and kick your heels up, but we do need you to be active in thinking and discussing and giving feedback. That's the first thing. Keep an open mind. Generally speaking, in training, we hope to bring to the table things that you already do in your classrooms, so things you're familiar with. Some things that perhaps you used to do but you haven't done for a while, and maybe some new activities that you haven't seen before. I'm not suggesting you do all of them, but the idea is you keep an open mind and in the future try out a few new things. But again, as I always say, it's very important, share the feedback from that. So share your experiences with each other. And as you know, there's no magic wand in teaching. There's nothing I can do when there are issues or problems where you can wave a magic wand. You know this, and there's an answer. We need to keep chipping away at trying new things, different things, to improve things. There's no right answer to any of this. So as long as you keep those things in mind for the next today and tomorrow, we should be good to go. So, first of all, you do have a bit of paper. As you registered, I think you were given a writing pad and a pen. I would like you to follow the next set of instructions. Remember, you have 3 minutes. If you don't have paper, can you borrow some paper? People have got pads around there. Okay, I would like you to do the next task in 3 minutes for yourself and think about how your students, sorry, I don't mean to forget you there, keep my eye line. Think about how your students would feel if you asked them to do this task. Just before we start, a quick task. Go. You have 30 seconds. 500 words. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. That wasn't exactly 3 minutes, but I think you get the idea. What I want to focus on a little bit today, as well as helping our learners to write better, is to think about some of the frustrations that students have. So with the person sitting next to you, or in a group of 3, think about how you felt doing that piece of writing. And I noticed some of you, I mean, you all have native speaker level of English. You should be able to do this. Probably not 500 words in 3 minutes. That was a little bit tough, obviously. But think about how it made you feel to do this. Some of you started straight away, because I was looking at your faces. Some of you did this for a while and then started, and some of you didn't write at all, which is fine. Think about how it made you feel. Think about if you did a task like this with your students and how they would approach it. I'm going to give you just a minute to discuss with the person next to you. How did it make you feel? How would it make your students feel? I'm not suggesting you teach writing like this. I'm just saying, how would they feel? Okay, so as I say, you all have native speaker level of English. Put your hands up if you found it really easy and you started writing and it all flowed and... Cool, good, well done, very nice. Who had a look at the task itself and thought, hang on, 500 words in 3 minutes? Yeah, a couple of you, exactly. So that's one thing to think about when you set writing activities, and you will see students read through and go, I can't do that. That's too much in too little time. And a few of you didn't even start it because it seemed way too difficult to begin with. So that's something to think about. Yeah, I mean, it was a bad joke. Oh, okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about why students dislike writing. Do your students dislike writing? Put your hands up if you have students that love writing. So generally speaking, it's something that our students don't feel very positive towards. So I want to have a look at that and think about why students feel that way. So how are we going to approach it? How can we change some of this negativity? And then part of the session is going to have a look at correcting and assessing writing too. So to begin with, again, with your partner, why do students feel negative about writing? And can you think of 3 reasons why they feel negative? And can we keep this positive? So can we not say things like, because they're lazy? Please. Why do you think our students have a negative feeling towards writing? I'll give you a minute to just think of 3 reasons. Talk together. Okay, so can I get some feedback from you, gentlemen? I talk to the ladies quite a lot. Okay. 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 So some of the negativity is the feeling that when am I going to use this? This isn't any use to me. For the sake of it. Mhm. Mhm. All right. So some of the topics we expect our students to deal with aren't really anything that they're interested, or sometimes possibly, depending on what you're using, some of the topics are just not relevant to them, or they don't know anything about them, or they're not interested in them. Mhm. Good. You've pointed out a few of the things that I have as well, and I've listened to some of the other things that you've been saying. This is what when I teach in Riyadh, this is the first thing that my students say. And I was telling the gentleman over there, I don't go into a class now and say, we're doing writing today. I kind of try and feed it in. I sneak it in. Because if I come and say, oh, we're doing writing today, the hands go up. No, we're not. I don't want to do that. And the first thing they say, do we have to? It's boring. So students already have this negative feeling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And a lot of students struggle with handwriting as well. Lower levels. It's a different alphabet, and not everybody feels confident. We'll look at this a little bit later, but don't forget, as soon as you put something on a bit of paper and give it to somebody, you're kind of putting yourself out there a little bit. You know, that's personal. It's not, we did this together, it's me, I did this. Now you give it to the teacher, and they're going to judge what I did. And that's where a lot of the negativity comes, I think. I have a lot of my students that say, I just don't know how to start. I've got no ideas. I don't know how to begin. No ideas about the topic. And you touched on these topics that might not seem relevant to them or not useful to them in the future. Maybe some students don't write very much in their own language. So it's not something that they're used to having done from when they were, children.
Could that possibly be a plus for writing another language? Since you don't have all these preconceived notions, maybe it's a negative, but some people could possibly.
I think if you are able to introduce writing in a way that is positive, and that you scaffold it enough so that students can be successful. If they've had no experience in their own language of negativity, you could definitely turn it round. Yeah. Students, as I said, they do this piece of writing that they're responsible for, and quite often we have to correct it, and that may be the way it's done in that institution. We give the corrections back, or we indicate where the errors are and we give them back. And there seem to be quite a lot for students. They know they're making a lot of mistakes. And I've tried using different colours with my students, and they're like, yeah, okay, it's not red, but it's still a lot of mistakes that I'm making. And they feel quite responsible for that. It's not positive. Oops. Students feel that when we take a long time correcting mistakes, that a lot of my students tend to do the piece of writing, go finished, and they do not want to see it again. It was painful to get it done to begin with. You mark it, you give me the corrections, and I never want to have to see it again. So this idea of editing, some students can feel a little bit negative towards. They feel like it's going on forever. And basically, I feel most of the problem with students... I can see you again, sorry. Most of the problem is that students find it difficult. They feel responsible for it. And I was talking to the ladies back there. Honestly, is there anything that you particularly enjoy doing that is going to be incredibly difficult and you're mostly going to get wrong at the end of it? Are you going to put any effort in to begin with? Do you really want... Challenging is different to really, really difficult. And your students might want to have a go if they think there's success at the end. But if it's going to come back at the end with loads and loads of errors and it's all disorganised, this is when I think students begin to build up this negativity towards writing. So we need to look at what we can do to change this mentality of feeling negative. So if we think about the way students feel and the way we want them to be, what are the elements of a good writer? So the first one I've come up with is they need to plan. Many students don't do this unless you hold their hand and take them through the planning process and you give them the means to plan. Quite often, if you give them a title, they'll just keep writing. Or they'll just continue writing without stopping and organising and planning and thinking. What are the other elements of a good writer? Yeah, good. Vocabulary. Imagination, yeah. Okay, good. Yep, being able to organise. Yes. Yeah. So we do want our students to feel like they can take a risk as well. And if they're feeling negative, they don't want to do that. So they do need to feel confident as well. Some of the things I had is that good writers use appropriate layout. So they know what that is. There's a clear message behind what they're writing. They need a range of devices to be able to connect language, connect sentences, and of course they need a good range. They do need vocabulary, but they need a range of it as well. So we're not looking at them using the same vocabulary all the time. How can we get them to extend what they use and to use different grammatical structures? Punctuation is important. Obviously spelling. Are your students good spellers? Generally that's an area that's quite tricky here. So, thinking about approaches to teaching, we've thought about why they're feeling negative, we've thought about what makes a good writer, how are we going to go about teaching writing? And what I want to focus on today is two very typical approaches to teaching writing. Does anybody know what they are? They've been around for a while. If I give you the first one. So we have an approach to writing that's called a product approach. A product's good, someone's saying it. And the other one is, yes, very good. So we're looking at a product approach and a process approach. And I would like you to think and have a chat now, very quickly, what do we mean by a product approach? And what do we mean by a process approach to writing? And just, I'll give you a minute, which one do you favour? I'm not saying that you use one over the other all the time. Which one do you favour and why? 1 minute. If you're not familiar, think of product at the end of the road. Process, how you get to the end of the road. All right. So when we think of a product approach, we're obviously focusing on the end, yeah, what it is that the students produce, not how they get there. And the process approach is, yeah, how they get there. Hands up if you think you teach more with a product approach or a process approach. We'll have a look at, in more detail at them, or a bit of both. Product, process, a bit of both. Never teach writing anyway. Okay, as I was saying over here as well, as with a lot of different things and a lot of different approaches that we read about, at the end of the day, a mix of everything is quite a good idea. You were saying that you use a bit of both. All right, let's begin with a process approach then. And I'd like you to have a look at these different stages of a writing lesson. And I've done the first one for you, brainstorming. And with the person next to you, just think in what order you would do these in a lesson using a process approach. Order the process. Okay. Can you check if you had the same order as me? I'm happy to take different orders. You can throw bits of paper at me if you disagree. Do you want to? Can you just take the microphone?
Oh, really? Okay, all right. Oh. Okay. I would analyze a model to use inductive learning or implicit learning. And then I'd go on to, with collaboration in a brainstorm, plan, write, review, edit, rewrite. And that's what I would do.
Would anyone agree with that? Would you put analysing a model before brainstorming? I think maybe brainstorming, we could use a different word for that, maybe more like introducing a topic. Perhaps the first one should be where you might have students looking at a picture or watching a bit of a video just to bring in the topic rather than brainstorming at the beginning. Good point, you got me. Okay, what I'd like to... did you get the same order for the rest of the lesson? Good. What I'd like to focus on, though, is analysing a model, because this is one of the my favourite parts of a writing lesson and a process writing lesson. So using a model, students are given a model to analyse. Why? I want you to think, why use a model, and how can you use a model to help students to write? First of all, what is a model? Before we go any further. Yeah. It's like a template, or somebody at the back said it's an example. Where would you get a model from? Would you get a model from the course book? Would you get a model from... Okay, so you would write the model yourself. Is there a reason why you write... Is there a reason why you might write the model yourself rather than taking it from a book? Yeah. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because I've done it so many times. If you take an example from a book, watch the level. If you take a reading text, that's not the level you expect your students to produce. That's way above that. Reading is receptive. What you expect students to produce is going to be a lower level than that. If you give them an example that's a higher level than they can produce, that's when the negativity comes in. The model, the level of the model, it's really important, like you say. Actually, at the end of the day, I always write my own models. It doesn't take very long. But if you don't get a good model to begin with, before you even start analysing it, it's all going to go wrong. So I write them myself because I have taken them from course books and students just can't produce English at that level. Yes, yeah, make sure you've got the level right. Okay, so again, together, why use a model? Why am I banging on about models? Why do I think models are so important? Why do you think they're important, or maybe not? And what can you do with a model? How can you use them to help students write? Because I'll share with you, I do a lot of observations in universities and schools in Saudi, and I see people using models really, really well, but I do see some teachers saying, have a look at that. That's the kind of thing I want you to do, okay? Get on with it. No, they don't say get on with it. They say, okay, use that to help you start writing. And obviously it doesn't work then because the students don't have a task to do with the model. So what I would like you to think about is why do we use a model and what can we do with the model? It's not good enough just to have it. Students need to do something with it so they can notice things. 1 minute. Okay, so why do we use models then? Why do I think they're so brilliant?
Because they don't have a structure to begin with. And it gives us some kind of idea of what the structure is, how it's written. So they look at it and they say, okay, so it's about this many words, it has an introduction, it has a main body, and a conclusion. So there's a structure, it's kind of like a skeleton.
Yeah.
That they can go on. Because if you don't give it to them, they just, what I've noticed they do, they write 5 lines, nobody understands it, and then they stop.
Yeah.
This way you tell them, okay, this is the size, this is the shape.
Mm.
And within that, it works.
Yeah, so you're giving them a structure. Like you say, they can notice things like style. They can see how long it should be. And if you keep your model, I was just saying to these gentlemen here, if you keep the model super simple, you're going to get students look at it and go, oh yeah, all right then, I could do that. I can do something like that. See, now I know what it is you're looking for. I can do it. It's scaffolding. And that is the big word with a model. And yes, your students are probably going to copy quite a lot of it. And this gentleman here was saying, yeah, it's a bit annoying because you get the same kind of writing. When you take it into Mark, everyone's virtually done the same thing. I think that's inevitable at the beginning because it's a lot of scaffolding. You're virtually holding them up at the beginning. You're virtually saying, here's an example, just take my information out and put your information in. That's fine. They're still noticing things. But the next time you do a piece of writing with them, you're going to expect them to put more of them in and less of the example that you've provided. The gaps get longer. So you scaffold less and less and you put them down. And eventually you hope that they will run away doing it themselves. That's the idea behind it. So you've all mentioned it's an example that students can use. And this idea of students feeling super negative about writing, a model is there to help them feel more confident. It's an example of what they can do. Make it super simple to begin with. The reason I make it more simple or simpler than I know my students could probably produce themselves is to combat this negativity that they have, so that they believe to begin with, I'm going to have a go, I can do it, I could probably do this quite well. So thinking about the kind of things that you can do with a model, I think a lot of us do this to notice language within the model. So finding a particular tense, underlining examples of the tense, helping students to notice correct language they need to use. I do a lot of this with different colours, so students can underline all the verbs, notice what tense they are. They can underline different signposts. They can underline adverbs of frequency and use those if they want. They can notice how the verbs end. They can notice in a different colour or underline differently. They can notice the negative forms of the verbs. So the actual language itself, you can get them analysing. What else can you do with a model? Have you got any other ideas? Yeah, good. So a model with a bad model. What do you think about a bad model? I think it's a nice idea to show a good model and a bad model and get them to notice what's wrong with the bad model. I would say be a little bit careful with bad models because that's what they remember. You don't want them taking it away. But if you do enough comparison, so it might be, for example, it works well with style. So if it should be something formal and it's an example of a student that's written it in a very casual way, and you can get them to underline the phrases that make it casual that could be more formal. So it's not really errors that they're remembering, because there is a danger if you give them mistakes, that's what they take away and not the correct language. Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, you don't know that everyone's... Yes, I agree with the lower levels, yeah, definitely. Okay. Somebody else, yes.
I mean, you can vary them all. You can, for example, most of the written stuff for English in the university is English for academic purposes, and that's going to be expository. Yeah. So you can have your model, and you can vary it for cause and effect, explaining for...
Yes. Yes.
And we just use the different connectors.
Yes. I think models are fantastic to show students chunks of language so that they're not having to analyse individual words to put them together, because that's just another level of having to process language to get it down on paper. If they can use 4 words for a function, that's so easy for them. And if they can collect those words for next time as well, that have a certain function, and that they have a, use a variety of language for that function, that's when they start to build up their vocabulary and their language, and they can use it next time. Some of the things that, which is what you've mentioned here, some of the things that I've used in the past are matching useful phrases to functions, so that's something you mentioned. Working on organisation. So sometimes, I'm not a big fan of cutting up all the time because it's too much work for me, to be honest. But and also you see teachers spending a lot of time with lots of cut-ups and they get lost. But occasionally, if I feel that my students have a problem with organising their ideas, I might take a model and cut it up and get them to order it, to notice the different paragraphs and how they're organised, because this is getting them to focus on it. The worst thing we can do is say, notice how it's organised, and they look at it and go, it's organised, I've noticed, but they haven't really taken it on in any way. So you need a task with a model, depending on what it is you're looking to improve. The model can be a gap fill for very low levels, and we talked about that. You can either ask them to exchange your information in the model for theirs, or you can leave information out and they just have to put that in. That's at a very low level for students who are feeling really negative about writing, because you're giving them a lot of language. And also summaries of paragraphs can be matched as well. I do that sometimes, so that also helps them to think about the organisation and the content of each paragraph, so that they have to match what goes in to the paragraphs. Okay, so that's my sort of thing on models. As I say, I struggle now to teach a writing lesson without a model. That is, the model does the teaching for me. It really, really helps. So, thinking of the advantages before we look at some activities, I'm going to go through these with you. The advantage of a process approach, obviously, is scaffolding, and a few of you have mentioned that. The idea of going through this process and you taking the students through the process is you're holding them. You're avoiding this, you do the writing. You're taking them through the process to help them be better organised, to help them plan. They collaborate together to help them be more successful at the end and feel more positive about writing. The idea is, with a process approach, that it is more interactive. And we talked about collaboration when we ordered the lesson. So this idea that the more students collaborate together, the more interactive it is, the more engaging it is, but also the more they're going to communicate with each other, which is something that we want to really encourage. The process approach allows them to generate ideas, and they can use you, or they can use the example, or they can use each other. We talked about collaboration, but I think also, and I mentioned this a little bit with the ladies over there, using a process approach can help you decide on correction criteria. We're going to have a little look at that, but we tend to correct writing for grammar and vocab, and that's it. We don't assess students how they got to the product. So we don't usually assess the process. which is something that we could be assessing to get them to be better writers and feel more positive about it. Okay, so things we can do to prepare learners for writing. What was lacking when I asked you to write about your last holiday? You had no way of sharing ideas or brainstorming. You had no time to plan. There was no model, and nobody helped you with any structure or organisation. What approach did I use when I asked you to write about your holiday? Okay, is there the way I've been going on and on about the process approach, should we ever use a product approach then? Do you ever use a product approach? Even in creative writing, do you not take them through a process to get to the product? Is there any place for the product approach to writing? Assessment. I mean, at the end of the day, if the institution you work for is using testing, there's a good chance that they're going to be tested on their writing, and that really is turn a bit of paper over and deal with a writing question. Although you would still be encouraging your students to follow a process that you taught them. You don't want them to pick up their pens and start writing immediately. That's not how they learnt to write with you. So even under exam conditions, you want them going through some planning process, some organising process. The way I use a product approach is at the beginning of the term or the semester, I do this with students. I get them to write about a holiday they've just had or a day out they've just had, especially if the holiday's just gone before. I don't give them any help, we don't follow any process, and I take the pieces of writing in. Then throughout the semester, the idea is that they learn to be better writers, they learn more about writing. And at the end, the students do a piece of writing, something similar to a last holiday. It might be a trip out with their family or something. Then I take out the piece of writing that they did at the beginning of the semester and I ask them to compare it to what they were able to produce towards the end of the semester through process writing. So the idea is that they can see how much they've learnt by following a process, and that you take them through the process for a reason, because it makes them more successful. And the product at the end of the process is much better than if they don't use a process at all. And that's where I use it. So they keep a sort of portfolio of writing. And the idea is they go through and they see how much their writing improves. It's kind of proof, really, that it works. You can use going back to writing tasks. And we talked about chunks and sentence frames. These are some of the language that I could have given you to help you. Reasons for a good holiday. If I gave you the beginning of these sentences and asked you to end them, that if you completed these sentences, that could have been your piece of writing. That would have helped you. You wouldn't have needed ideas. So that's another way you can scaffold students to be more successful with their writing. And some more useful actual phrases that they can bank and use again, and vocabulary as well. Sequencing words are usually quite helpful for students, or any kind of signposting. Once they have these words, they can use them again. Okay, one activity I use with students is the consequences writing. And the idea here is that you've done your planning, you've thought about different vocabulary, different grammar. It's quite a fun thing to do with students where you give them the first sentence, they fold it over, and they pass the sentence around. And then they open the sentence, they read what the last person wrote, and they add another sentence. So that's a way where they have to think about what's gone before and add a sentence. Students quite enjoy doing that. Okay, what I would like you to do now is a dictation. So can you get out your bit of paper, and I'm going to dictate to you. And I'm going to dictate a piece of writing about my last holiday. So with a dictation, you need a bit of paper and a pen, and you're basically going to write what you hear. Okay? Are you ready? Ladies up there, are you ready? feel like I've really ignored you again. Okay, so, all got a pen and a paper. My last holiday was to Italy. I went in September 2016 with 2 friends, and we went to Rome. On arrival in Rome, we took a taxi to get to our hotel, which was in the centre. It was a really hot day, and the sun was shining brightly, so we were hot, tired, and thirsty when we arrived at the hotel. First we checked in, then we took our suitcases to our rooms, and after that we walked quickly to the nearest pizza restaurant as we were very hungry. You've stopped writing. What's the problem? You're going too fast. Stop it. Just stop it. It's Friday afternoon. All right, I'm going to do it again, but I would like you to listen to your categories. You're going to work in groups of 3. Are you going to be 3 together? Ladies up there, you need to be in a group of 3. Can I see 3? Okay, one group of 3. Put your hands up. Okay, keep your hands up. Okay, listen. Nouns, verbs, adjectives. The ladies behind you, put your hands up. Nouns, verbs, adjectives. Ladies at the back there. Nouns, verbs, adjectives. Observer. No, actually, sorry, no. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, nouns. Okay, can you put your hands up, nouns? Can I see the nouns with their hands up? Can I see the adjectives? Can I see the verbs? Good. All right, I'm going to read again. If you are nouns, you're going to write a list of what? If you're nouns, you're going to write the list of nouns. Please write them in the order that you hear them. Adjectives in the order that you hear them. Adjectives and adverbs. Yeah, because I want to make it more difficult for you. Are you ready? Are you nouns? No, nouns. Nouns, verbs, adjectives. Are you going to write everything you hear? No. Are you just going to write a list of words? Yes or no? I'm checking my instructions. You're all awake. Good. Okay. Yes. My last holiday was to Italy. I went in September 2016 with 2 friends, and we went to Rome. On arriving in Rome, we took a taxi to get to our hotel, which was in the centre of Rome. It was a really hot day, and the sun was shining brightly. So we were hot, tired, and thirsty when we arrived at the hotel. First, we checked in, then we took our suitcases to our rooms. After that, we walked quickly to the nearest pizza restaurant, as we were very hungry. We sat down and ordered a big, delicious cheese and mushroom and tomato pizza and 4 glasses of cold water. In your groups together, I want you to share your lists and recreate the writing. Okay, I'm going to, time's ticking on a little bit. Okay, what I would like you to think about is the task. This is called a dictogloss, but it's a dictogloss that, a dictogloss that I've kind of adapted for lower levels. If you Google the word dictogloss, what it basically is a form of dictation where you dictate to students and they listen to general ideas and then they collaborate together to put the ideas down on paper. So they're not actually doing dictation. The idea is with a dictogloss that they're recreating the text by thinking, not by just listening and writing. Because the problem with dictation is there's no check on meaning. It's like a reading race when you get students to read and then come and bring information. They tell the other person, it could be blah, 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 blah. There's no focus on meaning at all. But if you do it in a way where students are collaborating together to recreate the text, they've got to think about meaning. The reason a dictogloss doesn't work with lower levels so well is there's too much processing for them to do. So the idea I had with this was that they have to listen for certain words so that they have, if you have a list of nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs, you can recreate it, especially if it's in the right order and you've already heard it once. So it's quite important that they hear it once, because the second time they hear it, they're focusing on just listening for certain words, not overall meaning. They need to know what it's about to begin with. But I use this with my students quite a lot. And the great thing is, what does it produce at the end? Once they've recreated my writing, what have they got to work with? The M word, yes, an example. They have a model, but they put the model together themselves. So you're avoiding this. We're going to work with a model, because I use models a lot. My students are like, here she goes, more cut-ups, another model. This is a way of getting them to recreate the model. They focused on the model before you have to say, we're going to look at you're not going to say we're going to look at the nouns. They've already done it. What you can do to make it more collaborative, or if your students are a little weaker, is you can get all the nouns together, which is often something I do. Get all the nouns together and then they can check their lists. Some students are not as good at listening as others. Some students, if they think they can't spell a word, don't bother to write it. So they can just say, how many nouns have you got? 7. I've got 10. Do you want to add mine? So they can compare their lists before they go back to their groups, feeling confident that they have the whole list of words, and they collaborate together to recreate the writing, and then they have their model. They can use, what would you say that level is for? Would you say that's a high-level piece of writing or a lower level? Yeah, it's not way up there, but it's pretty simple. None of the ideas were very complicated. It's just a holiday in Italy where it was quite hot and I was looking for a hotel and a restaurant. So it's not a big deal in terms of the ideas. So this is something that lower level students would be able to recreate, but you've also given them a list of words and a model. Okay. Okay, so another way, which would... I think I think you make an interesting point that you would definitely save time if you gave the students the list of words. The only thing I would say is they won't engage with them if you give it to them, because you're giving it to them. They're not finding it themselves. Anything they have to discover, find, process, they learn. Anything you give them will stay with them for 10 minutes and it's gone. So if the level of, I suggest, if you think the level of this, even the level of this would be too high, grade the writing itself. Don't change the task. So make it even simpler than that. Half the number of nouns. Make sure you go back and look at your nouns. Did you choose food that, is difficult to write? could you use simpler food vocabulary that they're more familiar with, for example? The problem with giving it to them is they won't engage with it. And again, you're giving it to them. That isn't scaffolding. That's opening the box and giving it. But it would save time.
I think it would be beneficial also to remind the students, especially the ones who have the verbs, about like the word to be are also now verbs.
Yes.
Because they might, the younger, they might forget that.
Yes. I think once you've got your list of verbs and once students have collaborated together to recreate the text, I don't think you necessarily leave it there. You can still do some noticing activities. Part of the problem with this activity, and I've noticed with my students, is generally speaking, the list of nouns is the longest list. And the student who deals with the nouns tends, if I give it to the stronger student, they tend to be the one who takes charge in recreating. So they then are going to be the ones who engage with those particular words more than the others. That's the other thing. You're going to focus on your adjectives, you're going to focus on your nouns. You're not necessarily going to take much notice of the adjectives. So think about that as well.
I don't think you need to simplify the task. Just provide more scaffolding.
Okay. More scaffolding. I think when it comes to whether to simplify the text itself or provide more scaffolding, that is when you come to play, because I can just say, yeah, because you're imagining who your students are. And you're the professionals, and you're the ones who have to decide how to adapt or change or manage for whoever it is you're teaching. I can't do that for you. That's something that you know about. Okay. We've run out of time a little bit there. I would have liked to have spent a little bit more time on assessment, but it's possibly something we can come back to tomorrow or this afternoon. But we did touch on assessment, talking about assessment being, this evening, talking about assessment being part of the process and not just the product, and possibly with writing not only focusing on grammar and vocabulary mistakes, but thinking more about other things that we can assess, such as organisation and content and part of the process. But I am going to stop speaking now and give you a bit of a break. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Terry, for that fun and beneficial presentation. We will reconvene at 6 o'clock, so there'll be a short break, and I think there's coffee downstairs. Thank you.